This piece is entitled Deep Dickens. Marley was dead, to begin with. Dead sexy, that is. Scrooge knew he was sexy, of course he did. How could it be otherwise? With that lithe figure and those full lips, it would be a poor blind beggar indeed who could not recognize Marley's innate sensuality. The moment Ebenezer Scrooge laid eyes on Jacob Marley, his first thought was, I must do business. With that exquisite creature. Marley was not as attracted to Scrooge's body, but he admired Ebenezer's dedication to finance. The only thing more attractive to Marley than a tight figure was a figure of sums. The flirting between Jacob and Ebenezer started, as so many relationships do, by talking about commodities trading. The sexual tension was palpable between them as they discussed the proper interest rates for various loans and whether ethics dictated the rate of increase. Over the weeks, Scrooge's obsession with Marley grew and grew. His fiancée Belle did not understand that it was Marley, not gold, that had displaced her in his heart, and so she left him, wishing him happiness in the life that he had chosen. But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, one less distraction from business or pleasure. And so for many years, Ebenezer and Jacob enjoyed a prosperous partnership as moneylenders under the business title of Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge Scrooge, and sometimes Marley. Scrooge was often flattered to be mistaken for such a handsome man with such fine business acumen as Jacob Marley. Although they enjoyed the pleasure of each other's company in the offices of their counting house, they had never properly consummated their partnership. Public attitudes being what they were towards buggery, if their love that dare not speak its name became known, their reputations would be ruined and their finances would crumble. A good public image was good for business. No one would want to have covenant with sodomites. And so their pent-up sexual frustrations were sublimated and channeled into their love for gold. Finally, one wintry Christmas Eve, Marley could stand it no longer. Ebenezer. Yes, Jacob. Lately I find I'm having certain urges. Needs that only another man can fulfill. Surely you could hire a man of the streets to fulfill those urges, Jacob. Are there no prisons, no workhouses? Ebenezer, these urges are for a very specific man with specific skills in business. Scrooge's pulse quickened as if a spirit had laid its hand upon his heart. Would it finally happen tonight? After all these years of wishing and hoping, Scrooge felt blood beginning to rush to his prodigious engine. Before he knew it, his tackle was hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire. Jacob, he said, in the interest of keeping business moving at a steady rate, I suggest we skip past formalities and get right down to it. Are you suggesting that we finally make our partnership more than official? My dear Scrooge, Marley replied, that is precisely what I mean. Then I suggest we make the most of this fine Christmas Eve and get to it. Marley made sure the doors were locked and the windows shut. Scrooge lit the candles and put extra coal on the fire. Although darkness was cheap, which is how Scrooge liked it, and external heat and cold had little influence on him, this was a moment he had waited years for, and it would be best to cultivate the proper atmosphere. When they made sure they were completely alone and secure, they embraced. Scrooge and Marley's tongues darted back and forth in each other's mouths, like two snakes entwined in a most erotic dance. After tipping the velvet for some time, Ebenezer and Jacob slowly removed each other's vestments until they stood before each other in total honesty. Marley traced his fingers across Scrooge's bony chest, then slowly dropped to his knees. Marley's jaw practically unhinged in order to greedily swallow Scrooge's stiff sinew like a starving orphan asking for more. Marley worked Scrooge's shaft like a dairymaid churning butter. Finally, Scrooge's warm gush entered Marley's cheeks, and it was heaven for both of them. In what seemed like an uncharacteristic display of generosity, Scrooge reciprocated Marley's oral favours. It was not born so much out of generosity as it was greed and pride. Scrooge would show Marley that he too could bring pleasure to the man of his dreams. Scrooge moved his lips round Marley's truncheon and made sure to make good sport of Marley's dangling whirligigs. Marley was delighted to find that Scrooge could be such a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. After they had both achieved oral pleasure, they knew that the evening was far from over. No refractory period was needed. This encounter had been years in the making, and they were determined not to waste a moment. Scrooge laid on his stomach and opened his white cliffs for Marley's arbor vitae. Marley's insertion brought Scrooge such intense pleasure that he was reminded of the joys of childhood. Running with his schoolmates through fields and receiving visits at boarding school from his sister Fan. For a brief moment, Scrooge felt a loss at the thought of his beloved sister. He really should make an attempt to reconnect with her son, his nephew. What was his name again? Was it Frank? Marley inserted himself once again, and Scrooge was flooded. Not only with Marley's balsamic injection, but even more youthful memories of the good times he'd had as an apprentice for Mr. Fezziwig. Marley's physical affections for Scrooge were reminding him of a man he once was, a man Scrooge had thought to be long dead. Scrooge's heart was beginning to thaw. One might even say it was on the verge of growing 3 sizes that day. Scrooge felt light as a feather, as happy as an angel, as merry as a schoolboy. Scrooge grabbed Marley, gave him a deep, passionate kiss, then moved him to the floor and entered his back avenue. Scrooge moved in and out like a hansom cab, making its way back and forth beneath a bridge covering. Scrooge filled Marley's posterior with a pearly shower and laid back so that they could both bask in the glow of a new partnership with so many avenues yet to be explored. Ebenezer and Jacob held each other for quite some time. Scrooge was already planning a romantic feast for the next encounter. He would go down to the shop and buy the prize turkey in the window, the one as big as a small child. What a treat for Marley that would be. Scrooge's heart was so full that he was even considering forgiving some of the firm's outstanding bills, and even raising the salary of Bob Cratchit, their clerk. The silence finally began to grow too large, and Scrooge wished to hear Marley's velvety tones in his ear. "Speak comfort to me, Jacob," he whispered. Silence. No words passed Marley's lips. Scrooge sat up to look and saw that Marley's eyes were frozen open so that he could see the once dazzlingly blue pupils were now turning grey. His mouth, the one that had brought Scrooge such unearthly delights that evening, was blue, and his milky skin grown pale. Ebenezer slowly dressed himself and Jacob as tears rolled down the cragged lines of his cheeks. In the days to come, it would be said that Marley's heart had given out during a late night of work at the office. On Christmas Eve, people would ask, but it was no surprise. Marley was known to be a lonely man whose time was spent only on work. Only Scrooge knew the truth. Marley's heart did not give out. It was filled until it had burst. To know one night of ecstasy and have it taken away only served to harden Scrooge's cold, unforgiving nature. In his whole life, Scrooge had only known 2 passionate loves, Jacob Marley and money. Having lost one, he would be sure never to lose the other. Scrooge would not see Marley again for 7 more Christmases. The end.
Just one man.